כמו שכמה מכם יודעים, אבי שרד את השואה, ביחד עם שני אחים, היה כמה דברים, שני דברים, חוץ ממזל או השקפה פרטית, שעזרו להם לשרוד. הראשון, זה היה נדר ביניהם, להישאר ביחד בכל מחיר. והשני, שהם גדלו במשפחה של שענים, והם ידעו את המקצוע. יש סיפור אהוב במשפחתי, שמשקף העיקרים אלו, וגם יכול לחזק אותנו במצב הנוכחי שאנחנו נמצאים בו עם הקורונה וכל הדברים שהם לא כמו היו בשואה, אבל לא קל בכל מקרה. אז בסוף המלחמה, מדובר בפברואר 1945, אחרי סד מוות מאושוויץ, שלושת האחים היו במחנה במלק באוסטריה. והיה לכם שעון אחד שהרוויחו באושוויץ דווקא, והם שמרו את זה למצב חירום, אם הם צריכים להשתמש בזה למשהו. וקרה דבר כזה, ואבי שיחדו את המפקד צריף שלהם להוציא שמותם מרשימה לעבור לצריף אחר שלא היה בו שום הגנה מקור הנוראי שהיה בחורף באוסטריה. והרבה אנשים מתו בצריף הזה, והם פנו למפקד הצריף הזה לראות אם יש אפשרות לעשות משהו. והמפקד הזה הוא היה גרמני, אבל לא היה בצבא או SS או משהו כזה, הוא היה אסיר גם כן. אסיר או שעיר? אסיר, אני חושב. והוא עשה פשע פוליטי או משהו כזה, אז בגלל זה הם שלחו לו למחנה ריכוז. השוחד התקבל אצלו, והוא עזר להם, והם נתנו לו את השעון הזה. דרך אגב, העבודה במלק הייתה לחפור מערות בהרים, לאפשר בניית בית חרושת צבאי מתחת לאדמה, והקצטים הצעירים עבדו במשמרות 24 שעות כל יום. ואבי עבד במשמרת לילה, והוא חזר מוקדם בבוקר כל יום, והאחים שלו עבדו במשמרת יום וחזרו במשהו כ3 אחרי צהריים. וזה במקרה השעון שהם נתנו למפקד הזה, מפקד הגרמני הזה, הפסיק לעבוד. והם הצליחו לתקן אותו גם כן, וברמה מסוימת זה בדרך הפך להיות סוג של יחסים טובים ביניהם לבין המפקד הזה, והוא העריך אותם ברמה מסוימת. הכל במסגרת של המחנה, כי זה לא אומר שהם היו חברים או משהו, אבל הוא לא הרביץ אותם, והוא לא התעלל אותם, משהו כזה. וזה קרה יום אחד שאבא שלי חזר מעבודה מוקדם בבוקר, והלך לקבל את המנה מרק שלו, שהם נתנו להם מרק שעשו מקליפות תפוחי אדמה. ובמקרה המפקד צריף הזה היה עובד בתור במטבח לחלק את המנות מרק לכל אסיר. והוא הסתכל באביו עם חיוך קטן ואמר לו שאפשר לו אחר כך להביא את הקערה לקבל עוד מנת מרק. וזה היה משהו מאוד מאוד נדיר, כאילו זה מתנה משמיים או משהו כזה, אוצר אמיתית. והיה הרגשה שהם היה רעב מאוד מאוד כבד, והרגשה שדבר כזה אפשר לחיות בעוד יום ולא למות. זה היה הרמה של הרעב שהם היו בתוכו. ואבא שלי החליט במקום בשנייה הזאת שהוא ישמור את המרק הזה, לחלוק אותו עם אחים כשהם יחזרו יותר מאוחר ביום הזה. והוא הביא את המרק הזה, הקערה, והחביא אותו מתחת המיטה שלו, והוא שכב על המיטה, וכל רגע וכל שנייה, רק על המרק הזה הוא חשב, והוא חשב הרבה דברים, והיה לו הרבה יצר איך לאכול את המרק הזה לבד, כי בסופו של דבר הוא הבטיח, אבל רק הבטיח לעצמו, הוא לא אמר לשום בן אדם אחר, והוא חשב שאולי הוא יאכל את הכל ואף אחד לא יודע. ואחר כך הוא חשב אולי חצי אפשר לאכול, והם לא יודעים מה הוא קיבל. ובכל שלב הוא אמר, לא, אני צריך לשמור את זה, אני צריך לחצן עצמי, ואני לא יכול, והוא חשב אולי אפילו כף אחד אפשר לקחת מהקערה הזה, וסופו של דבר הוא הצליח לרסן את עצמו מהיצר, והוא זכה, בזה הוא זכה לשבת ביחד עם האחים שלו, ולחלוק את המרק הזה, כף עד סוף המרק. וזה הסיפור. הוא אמר שהם אכלו את המרק הזה עם הרגשה נפלאה, שאי אפשר להגדיר אותו אפילו. הרגשה אחדות עמוקה של אמון מוחלט, שלא היה תמיד, אפשר להגיד, בקרב אנשים אחרים במחנות, אפילו אחים שהם עשו דברים מאוד לא יפים אחד לשני, והוא אמר שזה אף פעם לא היה אצלם, והאחים שלו עשו דברים בשבילם כמו זה, והוא אמר לי הרבה פעמים, לא רק אחד, שעם כל הדברים שהוא עבר בשואה, הוא גאה ביותר על דבר הזה. זה נשמע כמשהו די קטן, בהשוואת כל הדברים האחרים שהם עברו בשנים האלה, אבל בתפיסת חיים שלו זה היה מתוך החשוב ביותר ומתרגש ביותר. והסיפור הזה סיפרתי לילדים שלי הרבה פעמים בגיל רך, כי קודם כל זה סיפור די קל ולא כבד עם כל הדברים נוראים שהיו בשואה, אבל חוץ מזה ויותר חשוב מזה, רציתי ללמד אותם מה חשוב בחיים ומה מחזק את הגוף ואת הנפש ומה מעלה הנשמה בזמנים קשים. ו-fast forward כמה שנים טובים עד שהילדים שלי היו קצת יותר גדלו, וחזרתי מעבודה ביום השואה אחד, ומצאתי בשולחן מטבח שלנו קערה של מרק מקליפות תפוחי אדמה, שילדות שלי עשו בעזרת קרי כמובן, וישבנו וחלקנו כף את המרק הזה עד סוף המרק. וזהו. זה הפך להיות מסורת משפחתי שאנחנו עושים עכשיו כל שנה.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. I will pass to Shuli. I don't find you, Shuli. Just a second. Shuli, you're not with Ari? Okay.
No, she's not with me. She's called admin. But if you want, Miriam Briggs is meant to speak now anyway.
Yes. Okay. So Miriam, I unmuted you, so you can now start. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. I'm beginning my story about my husband, Henry Briggs, Alavra Shalom, who was born in Krakow, Poland on the 9th of March, 1939, to Ida Dushamala and Avraham Yona, called Yannick Ehrenreich. Henry, my husband, was called Henrik Ehrenreich. Henry's maternal grandmother, which may seem like something I'm just throwing at you out of the blue at the moment, her name was Beagle Eyes. And just remember that and keep it in your somewhere for later on in the story, right? But their married names were Dusha and Yannick Ehrenreich, and on the 9th of March 1939, they gave birth to their one and only son called Henrik Ehrenreich. At that time, there were 60,000 people in Krakow, of whom a third were Jewish. Yannick and Dusha were married in March 1938 and were very, lucky as they came from a relatively wealthy and middle-class home. Both had tertiary education and were from traditional Jewish families. They spoke Polish but understood Yiddish. When the war broke out, Henry's father was an import-exporter and had 20 barges on the Vistula, full of rice and sugar, and of course many trucks used for transporting these goods once on shore. Dusha Mala was the youngest of 5 children, of only whom 3 survived the Holocaust. And Yannick was the oldest of 4 siblings, of whom 3 survived and came to live in Israel. The family owned a 4-story 19th century building on Josefa Sarego 18 in Krakow, near Kazimierz, which was the Jewish quarter. They had, the parents, Henry's parents, had a 3-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor. It's in September 39, when Henry was 6 months old, the Germans invaded and the Krakow Jews had to report for forced labour and to wear armbands. The family decided that they'd better flee. So with trucks laden with goods and furniture, they fled to Lvov, 320 miles east of Krakow, now in the Ukraine. Before getting very far, the German roadblocks confiscated everything. They were simply left with what they were standing in, but they made it to freedom. The whole family lived in 2 tiny apartments. All money was spent on food and rent. In April 1940, the Russians deported 200,000 Jews to Russia, Tajikistan, Siberia, as slave labourers. Henry's father, being the oldest of the family, decided that he was not going to go with them, but he'd better stay behind so that he could send them parcels of food. So he kept fleeing and hiding from place to place. Henry and his mother were very blonde, and they looked and could pass as Aryans. So Henry's mother got counterfeit Aryan papers, and she became Zosha Zrabinski. She worked in a railway kitchen, which helped because sometimes she could stuff things down her bra and bring extra food home. They went back to Krakow, and in the apartment where Henry's parents had lived, now lived their chauffeur, Yannick Leginovitz, and his family. And he said that he would take Henry in and look after him so that Henry's mother, Dusha, could go out and work. So for 6 months, he stayed there in his parents' apartment with the Leginoviches. But then Yannick Leginovich said to Dusha, look, there's rumours going around that we're hiding a Jewish child in the building, and I think we have to move him from here very quickly. So this, of course, horrified Dusha, but Yannick took her and Henrik in a taxi or tram or something or other to the other side of Krakow, and they met a family of 2 ladies, a mother and her spinster daughter. Their names were Mamachka and Jadwiga Gabauer. Meanwhile, in June 1941, Henry's father had been sent to the Yanalska labour camp. They managed to go by train, Dusha and Henry, a couple of times and visit. And Dusha organised for Yannick to escape. They were quite wealthy and she had quite a few diamonds, and she bribed everybody here, there and the other. And they managed to get Henry's dad into a coffin and bring him out of the labour camp, and they were going to escape. But a terrible thing happened when he got out of the coffin. He said, I can't go with you. I've contracted typhus. I'm very, very ill. I have to stay here and get medicine and liquids. And if I came with you, we'd be caught because I wouldn't survive very long. So the horrible thing is that back he went into the coffin and was taken back into the labour camp, where he died a month later. That left Dusha and Henrik. And they went and took Henrik to Mamchka and her daughter, Jadwiga, and asked would they look after Henry so she could go and do some work. And they said, oh, look, we don't know. We have to speak to our priest. So the two ladies went to speak to their priest, who was in the church in the Wawel in Krakow. And the priest, which wasn't known to us then, but we found out later, happened to be the gentleman who would become Pope John Paul the 23rd. And he was a very, very good man. And he said to the two ladies, you must try and save an innocent child. And that's how Henry came to live with them. He was very loved by them. They looked after him. He didn't have anyone to play with. He was never allowed to take his trousers off. And he had one little boy who came and played with him from next door, who was a Down syndrome boy. And what Henry told me they used to love doing was when there was a truck full of manure that came for the vegetable garden that the two ladies had, they would roll up balls of manure and throw them at each other. He remembered that very well. And he loved going to church with the family. The family were very religious. He became a very strict Catholic and loved the wafers. And that was life at the time. He had visits from his mum. She stole food from the railway kitchen, which I told you, she stuffed down her bra, and she told Henrik she was his aunt. There were no toys, so he played with pots and pans. And if he was naughty, he was sent to the cellar. And he told me he could remember the rats crawling over his shoes. In 1945, Poland was liberated. It had been 3 years that Henry had been staying with Mamska and Jadwiga. The ladies wanted desperately to keep him. They'd become very attached to him. But Dusha brought her brother, the lawyer, and with certificates and papers, they said, you have to give him back to us. He belongs to us. And very sadly, they parted. After the war, people slowly returned to Krakow. Of course, Henry's father couldn't return. He had passed away. Henry lived with his mother and the Leginoviches in what was hers and her husband's apartment. And Henry went to school and started grades 1 and 2 in 1945 and 46. Dusha's brother had been hidden for 5 years underground. He had a farm and the peasants hid him under the barn, and they hadn't seen sunlight for 5 years. And he had family in Australia, his wife's family, and they decided they were going to go to Australia. Many of the family moved to Israel. Mother's mother's brother, Dunek, moved to Australia with his wife's family. And Dola and Artek, who had gone up to Russia, Dola was Zosha's sister, came back, and they had a little boy, Alex, Henry's cousin, and they met. So there was something of some family left there, but it was great poverty at the time. And life in Krakow was very, very difficult under communism. It was hard to find work. And Dusha went from being a woman of luxury to earning her living on the black market. She would go to Sofia in Bulgaria and bring back nylon stockings and sell them on the black market in Krakow. After the war, many people came back to Krakow looking for family that had survived. A man called Josef Bigeleisen, remember the name Bigeleisen? I told you that was Henry's mum's maiden name, came knocking on the door. He was born in August 1900, and he was a distant cousin. And he'd heard that Dusha lived there. He knocked on the door, and she recognised the name, although she didn't recognise him. And Joseph Bigeleisen had lived with his wife and young child in Tarnov, and they went out looking for food. And when he came back, he saw his family lined up with 90 other people in the town square, and they were shot before his eyes. His whole family was murdered as a reprisal to somebody who'd done something to a German, and therefore they took 100 of the first people they could get and shot them all. He was absolutely devastated, a broken man, and he came just looking for the remnants of his family. During the war, Joseph had fled and joined a Jewish partisan group, had a very hard life, starving and eating berries whilst on the run. But he and Dusha found comfort in each other, and they married on the 12th of March, 1946. And Joseph adopted Henry, and his name therefore changed from Ehrenreich to Bigeleisen. He became Henrik Bigeleisen. Life was very, very bad and hard. And Joseph was an engineer, but he couldn't find any work, so he had to dig the roads and help doing things like that. In the summer of 1946, late at night, there was a mad banging on the door of where they lived. And a bleeding man was on his knees at the front door. And Dusha, Henry's mother, recognised him and brought him in. He was one of the members of their smuggling gang, the ones that got the blackmail stockings and could sell them on the black market, black market stockings, and could sell. And he said, look, the police have discovered us. They know everybody that's in the group. And if you stay here, you will be all taken to prison. So they patched him up as best they could, and he left. And by early morning, both Joseph and Ida, Dusha, were on their way and on a train to Stockholm. Thence followed 2 years in Sweden. A new life. Joseph found work and helped invent an industrial thermometer, for which the owner of the company was very grateful and offered him a partnership. But Dusha didn't want to stay in Sweden. She had a brother and a sister. She'd lost a husband beforehand, although she had a wonderful new husband. She wanted to be with her family. So Dusha and her sister both thought if they could possibly get visas to Australia, where Dunek was, that's where they wanted to go. The joint arranged a flight to Australia from Paris in August 1948 in a converted American DC-3 plane, which left Paris for Sydney via Tehran and Darwin. But nothing goes smoothly, and the pilot sort of ran out of petrol over Basra, and he had to land. Now, if you know your history, at that stage, in 1940, late 1948, early 1949, the War of Independence was on, and Iraq was an enemy of Israel. So immediately the plane landed, and they saw that all the inhabitants of the plane, all the passengers were Jewish. They were immediately became prisoners of war. The men were separated from the women, and the situation was very daunting and uncertain, and the atmosphere was tense at all times. Henrik's mum came to the rescue again. She asked a passenger who was leaving on another plane to please take a letter and to post it as a matter of life and death. The letter was to her brother, Dunek, who by then was settled in Australia, who had very close friends in the Pentagon. They had been in Iraq 3 weeks when a miracle happened. A large military helicopter bearing US insignia and an American flag landed, and a decorated officer and 5 armed American soldiers disembarked. Henry's mum's brother in Oz had received the letter, contacted his friend in the Pentagon, and this was the result. Arguments flew. The American officer stood his ground and said that if the plane was not allowed to leave with its passengers within 24 hours, Iraq would find itself at war with the United States of America. The next morning, they were cleared to leave. Next stop, Australia. They landed in Darwin on the 18th of September, 1948. All was new, all was different, and life was very hard. Joseph worked at digging in the roads and had several heart attacks. They met brilliant, helpful doctors who gave of their time and caring to the couple who were very poor because their illnesses prevented them from working as hard as they would have liked. Henry was bar mitzvahed in 1952. Dusha had brought her sewing machine with her from Sweden, and with it she opened a business called Fable Lingerie. But she became very ill with scleroderma and couldn't use her hands. Joseph died of a heart attack in March 1956, aged 56, and Dusha died in late 1967, also aged 56. From the doctors that treated his parents with such kindness and giving, Henry knew what he wanted to do with his life, to help other people stay healthy. Henry worked very hard at school, but his name was a bugbear. In Australia, beagle-eyes and became beetlebum, bugglebigs, bugglebugs, and he had great difficulty. The Australians couldn't pronounce his name and they teased him mercilessly. So in his last year of high school, he changed it by deed poll to Briggs. That's where we get to Henry Briggs, the name of a famous Australian cricketer. Henry became a brilliant and admired physician. He kept learning and changing. So he then became, from a physician, he became a heart specialist, and finally at the age of 70 passed a major exam in his life to become an anti-aging and wellness doctor. Along the way, he joined Beitar and met a noisy, black, curly-headed girl to whom he took a fancy, and the rest is history. 3 of our 4 children made Aliyah, and in 2003, we bought a home in Renana and decided to spend 4 months of every year here in Israel. The rest of the year, Henry worked in Australia. At the end of 2017, we farewelled our kids and flew back to Australia. And within a month, Henry had passed away from pancreatic cancer. All our children, grandchildren, and 1 great-grandson were with us in Sydney for the last 3 weeks. And I cannot speak highly enough of their blessed loving and caring. We needed no one else. They were wonderful. Henry was buried here in Renana on the 23rd of Tevet 2 years ago, and I have made my home here permanently ever since. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be with my wonderful family, and I thank God for Henry's life and the life he managed to give me. Thank you.
Thank you, Savta. Miriam, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. Yes.
Well done, you did it. That was beautiful.
Thank you.
And one more thing to add, that everyone can see the picture in the background, which was at the book launch of Henry's book, which he managed to complete, surrounded by his family. And he managed to launch at the Sydney Jewish Museum just a few weeks before he passed away. It was incredible to all be there for that. A few soldiers weren't there. I think at least 2 of our soldiers weren't in Sydney then. Hello, Karen's in the picture.
Karen's in the picture, there she is.
Dan was in the army, I think. Dan and Dana couldn't be there because they were both in the army.
Yes.
Oh no, which made Saba very proud to have 2 Jewish grandchildren who were fighting in the army.
Very, very proud. I'm proud of his whole family.
And also you can see in the photo is baby Eli, who was Saba's and your first great-grandchild, and since there's been another one. Right. So he certainly had an amazing impact and left an incredible legacy of which we're all proud. Thank you.
You can see his book in the background. You can see his book in the background, which one can buy on Amazon. He led a very wonderful, fascinating life. I hope I've given you a little bit about it, but he was a very wonderful person.
Yes, yes. Thanks, Scott. Also, the microphone was muted at the end of your talk, so we didn't get to say thank you very much to you too. Guys, has anyone got any questions at this stage before we bring on our next and final speaker for tonight? Have we got any questions out there? We can take you off mute. If you have any questions, maybe just mention in the chat that you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, I'm very happy to answer anything. If I know the answers, I will most certainly try and...
I'm going to help him. He's got a fire in the kitchen. We've got a fire in the kitchen.
Fire in the kitchen. Oi, my boy.
Not joking. All right. So thanks, Safta. Without further ado, let's introduce Idor Moed. I think he's speaking now. Is that correct? Idor, so we need to take Idor off mute. David, please.
So,
I'm on noise.
hi. Can you hear me now?
Okay, we've got Idor speaking now.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you. Great.
Excellent.
And I think, does anyone here not speak? Would you prefer to speak in Hebrew or English, Idor?
I'll speak in English.
Okay, great. Does anyone here not speak English? Because I looked at the list and I think everyone is English speakers. Okay, great. So let's listen to Idor now. We're going to put everyone else back on mute. Thank you.
All right, but first, how is the fire?
Fire's out.
Okay, so we can continue. Thank you very much for having me, and thank you, Yuval, for inviting me and for being here this evening with everybody. I'm Yuval Moed's brother, and I would like to talk about both our parents, Yitzhak Moed and Ada Yanai, who were children during the Holocaust, and how it impacted my life, at least, and I think Yuval probably add some words from his perspective. First and foremost, both our parents, of course, were children during the Holocaust. So even if they did remember, whatever they remembered, they didn't share. And so they remembered little, but they also had great difficulty in sharing whatever they endured. So it was a sort of a discovery journey for us throughout the years to learn what they did, what happened to them, what happened to their families. And some of what I'll be telling you now is from accounts that were made by my mother's brother and sister, for example, and some of the stories that our father told Steven Spielberg Foundation at the time when they were making recording testimonies, which was also for us a first to learn a lot about what happened to him. And another message that I think is important today, when I'm reading these stories and I'm looking at whatever I remember from our both father and mother who are not alive today, is there are two things that really kept them alive and their families. And one is great hope and strong belief and ideology, Zionism, and also very practical resilience, which really made a difference. And I'd like to share some stories about that, how they endured the war. So let's start with our mother, Ada, Lida at the time. She was youngest of four brothers and sisters, and they were living in Amsterdam, where our grandfather worked in the diamond industry and later became the head of the Jewish education organization in Amsterdam. My mother's older sister said that he had a very strong belief, sort of auto-suggestion that he will make it, he will survive, and he will make it through the war. And there were a lot of indications for that. But when the war started and the Germans came into Amsterdam, there were bombs, there were soldiers walking throughout the streets. My mother's sister remembers that she looked out the window and her father came and stood by her, and he told her this. He said, "This is our first step towards Eretz Israel," which is absolutely amazing to say that in sight of soldiers walking through the streets. That was about 1941. They spent some 2 years in Amsterdam, and during difficult life circumstances, it became more and more difficult. They had to move to a smaller apartment. They had to, shopping was difficult, no bicycles, no school, just the Jewish school and so on. But talking about resilience, next to our grandfather was his wife, and Sophia. And she was the one that was keeping everybody alert. She was the one when they found this small apartment in Amsterdam East where they moved to, made sure that they had better conditions. She was the one that when one day the Germans knocked on the door and were looking for Marie de Jong, which the family name is the same as my grandfather's, de Jong. Our grandfather actually went and almost grabbed the bag to go, even if it wasn't his name and there was no Marie in the family. And it was our grandmother who said, wait a minute, this is a mistake, this cannot be. There is nobody of that name here. And the German officer was so convinced that instead of saying, well, then you come with me, he was actually confused by her, and he left and he said, I'll come back later. And it took another few months before they were taken away from Amsterdam. And during that time, they were also apprehended in one of those razzias in the streets of Amsterdam. And at that time, it was our grandmother, Sophia, was apprehended, and the rest of the family was let go. And our grandfather had to choose whether to stick with her or to go to separate from her and rescue the rest of the family. We're not sure how that story ended, but they remained together until later on in 1943, when they were picked up from Amsterdam and sent to Westerbork. Westerbork was a sort of a transition camp in the northern part of Holland, where all the Jews were shipped to, and from there sent to the concentration camps, to Auschwitz. When they came to Bergen-Belsen, our aunt, I think, recalled that, and this is the only thing that I think our mother ever told us about her experiences in the Holocaust, was that she had hair locks. She was 7 at the time, and her hair locks were cut off. And probably somebody from the organization of the camp, it wasn't Nazi soldiers, but she was so angry and so furious about that she really remembered that for a long time, that she told this to her sister when they were later on in Israel, when they met many years later in Israel. And that the fact that she couldn't choose, that her look was changed. The fact that our grandfather, for example, shaved his beard because he was afraid that Germans will grab his beard and torture him. This is something that remained very much with her at the time. From Bergen-Belsen, they were supposed to be sent to Auschwitz. But at that time, they also had our grandmother's sister was married to a Swiss gentleman who arranged for them, for a nice sum of money, I assume, to acquire Haitian citizenship. So they had Haitian citizenship, and so they had some extra, extra status. That is one. And the second part was that at some point, the Germans who held German citizens here in British Mandate at the time in Palestine, who wanted to repatriate, there were German Templars, they belonged to the Templar Church, wanted to exchange those for anybody that had a right to live in this area. And the people who had the right had certificates. Our family, our mother's family, had also family members who came to Palestine earlier, before the war. And so they arranged for them to have special certificates. And those certificates actually saved their lives. So they had what is called two advantages, let's say. And so they stayed a longer time at Westerbork, and at the time when they were supposed to be sent away, they were sent to Bergen-Belsen. Now, the transport to Bergen-Belsen is completely different than Auschwitz, and they said at the time it was actually done by passenger train. And they arrived in Bergen-Belsen. They stayed there for about half a year in Bergen-Belsen, and of course the circumstances were very, very bad. But it was not a concentration camp. It was not an Machane Rikuz. Machane Rikuz, I suppose everybody understands.
concentration camp.
Thank you. Yeah, but like extermination camp. That's what I meant.
Okay.
Thank you. Still the circumstances were very bad, but there were no gas chambers and so on. There was no mass extinction of Jews there, but they had to survive there for several months before they were sent to Palestine. One of our uncles was very sick. He had tuberculosis. He was actually saved by a German doctor who decided to send it on this transport to Palestine because he said, well, he probably not survive, but we'll get a live Templar for him in exchange. They arrived on the 10th of July, 1944 in Aklit, which many of them also celebrated as their birthday. And the story, Transport 222, also came out in a small booklet. And I think it is one of the most powerful stories of survival in the Holocaust. But of course, every story is amazing. And when it comes to me, I worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I'm a diplomat. And one of the first postings I had was in The Hague. And that summer when I arrived to The Hague, we got a call from Westerbork. They wanted somebody from the embassy to come to speak to some young Germans who are working there as part of a Wiedergutmachung program, which is sort of making good for what their ancestors did. And so they were waiting for me there in the camp at the end of the blown up railway. And I remember saying to them this, I told them, which was completely true, by the way. I told them, I came here by train just like my mother 65 years ago. And it was such a powerful moment for me because the same as also when our eldest daughter was born and leaving the hospital, my wife, after a long birth and everything was fine, I remember I had to stop the car because I was overcome by emotions. And the only thought that came to my mind was, we won. And we won against the Germans. So this is something that transcended also to us, to my brother and myself. So that's a little bit about our mother and a few words about our father, Yitzhak Moed, and about resilience. His family was living at the time in Belgium, and he was with his grandparents in Amsterdam. He was ill. He was taken to hospital because of appendicitis operation, so he was separated from his parents. And when the war started, he stayed with his grandparents. And for a while, he met his parents every now and then in a very remote location at night, by meetings in a restaurant somewhere near the border. But at a certain point, his family organized to flee. Many of them got to London, to the United States, even to South Africa. And his parents were on their way also to leave. And they arrived to Bordeaux, where they decided to come back and pick him up. They thought he was probably too sick to travel. They picked him up and they decided to flee to Switzerland. Coming to Switzerland, they were held on the border, almost on the border. They entered Switzerland. They were allowed to stay the night, but the next day, a policeman came and they went by themselves. Sorry. That's a story of obedience, of their own free and goodwill to the police station to register. And the policeman told them, you have to go back. You don't have official papers. So you have to cross the border legally and then you can go wherever you like. So they crossed the border back into France. They were picked up by German soldiers. And my father was separated from his mother. And the last thing he remembered her saying to him was, and that's the practical part, that's the resilience part. She said to him, do what it takes to survive. And he was sent to a monastery. He was kept there for a while and then sent to an orphanage in Paris where he made contact with his grandparents in Amsterdam. And they arranged for somebody, it's a long story, but they arranged for somebody to visit him and after a while to connect him with the Red Cross and to repatriate him to Belgium, where he originally came from Antwerp, and where he was picked up by his uncle on Shabbat night from an orphanage where he was sent to, taken to his home, stayed with them, hid with them through the war. And one of the only tangible things we have left from our father from that period is the Haggadah that he wrote during his time in hiding. And I was reading it, and I was thinking, what was on his mind when he was writing L'Shana Abaa B'Yerushalayim? And I know that throughout his life, that was something that always was very vivid with him, very strong. And so we got a very strong message from both our parents about Zionut and our Jewish identity. And so this day for me is, of course, a very personal day, but connects very strongly with our identity as Jews. And so this morning, somebody sent on the WhatsApp of the family a short video of soldiers singing Ani Ma'amin B'Biat HaMashiach at the time of the Tzfirah. And for a moment, I was wondering, why weren't they singing Hatikva, which is something you would expect, soldiers and Tzfirah and all of that. But that's it. That's that connection. That's very, very deep connection. They're religious soldiers from Sam Yeshiva. And so this is what really touched them at that moment. This is what they did, most probably spontaneously. So that's it. I'm very happy to answer any questions, but I'll stop here. And thank you very much for listening and having me. Thank you.
I'll mute myself. Thank you, Idor. Thank you, Moeds. You guys really boosted our numbers, and it was incredible to hear the story. Oshra, do you want to speak? David has to unmute you. Hang on, maybe I can. Well, I think I'm also admin.
Okay, you hear me now? Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank all the speakers. First of all, I want to thank all the speakers. The stories are amazing, are uplifting. Really, I want to thank every one of you for what you shared with us. It's really so inspiring. I want to thank Shuli for initiating this and organizing it. Thank you, everyone. Miriam, I just want to say that picture as the background of you when you're speaking is such a beautiful, amazing picture. And I want to say that all of this inspiration comes from difficulty. As Ido, Naim Meod, you use the word resilience. You learn from dealing with difficulties to be resilient. You gain resilience. And the Scott's story about the brothers and Miriam about Henry, all the difficulty as the doctors helping the family and how he became a doctor to help other people. You grow from these challenges. And I just want to bless all of us that we should be able to grow, not because we have challenges. We have a challenge now also, and we want to grow from this. But I want to bless us all to continue to grow and be great when things are comfortable, when things are pleasant, and not only when we face these difficult challenges. I also want to mention that Arav Professor Eliezer Berkovich, in his book, Faith After the Holocaust, speaks about how the Holocaust, the Shoah, is the depth, the deepest, most dark place that humanity ever came to, but it's also the loftiest place. Why is it the loftiest place? Because in that time, people could easily lose it and be bad to one another, and they were good sometimes, and often people kept their humanity, kept their morality, and were good to one another. And we hear this today again, and these are beautiful, uplifting, very, very, very high sipurim ilaiyim, very stories on a very high level that Arav Berkovich says they should join, become part of the Tanakh. Of course, all of us should get proportions. I think Miriam, you mentioned someone who was one of the members of the family was underground for 5 years hiding. We hear of that. Okay, we have to stay home for a month, for 6 weeks, bidud for 2 weeks. Wow, it's peanuts. Go live underground for 5 years. So, chevre, we will overcome what we're going through, and we should appreciate everything that we have. And Ido, you mentioned the connection between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut. Yom HaAtzmaut is because that's the day Mishamayim that it was decided that Medinat Yisrael will be established. Yom HaShoah came about in such a roundabout way, but look what a beautiful thing it's created. What we now in the last couple of years have started calling it Aseret Yemei Tkuma or Aseret Yemei Shoah. They connect how we've grown. We don't want the Shoah to make us grow, but here we are, and we're learning to grow from it. And last thing I want to say is, not so. Last thing I want to say is that צריך עברית, אם צריך, אושרה אומרת לי אולי צריך עברית, אם צריך, אני אגיד גם בעברית. I think we've moved to English. Thank you so much, Scott, שדיברת בעברית. זה באמת ראוי להערכה. אז אני אגיד כן בעברית, שכל שנה יש טקסים בטלוויזיה, בעיר, יד לבנים. אנחנו לא מרגישים צורך לעשות את זה בתוך הקהילה. We don't feel a need to do these things within the קהילה. But we have so much richness within the קהילה. We have so much to hear from one another. We can keep doing this next year. You know, not instead of the national and the municipal ceremonies, but we can also, again, meet as a kehillah and hear the stories. There are tens of more stories to be told within our kehillah, and you know, we can continue doing this for another tens of years with the nation, with the city, and within the kehillah. So thank you so much, everyone, for sharing. תודה, תודה לאנשים שסיפרתם עליהם, ותודה לכם ששיתפתם, and בשורות טובות, everyone.
Wow.
Thank you, Shuli, for the idea. Amazing idea. ממש שולי, תודה על הרעיון. הרבה משתתפים. משפחת מועד, Scott and Miriam, very moving. Thanks for sharing.
Hi, Yorka.
Scott, your Hebrew was great.
Good to see you.
Thank you.
It's closed, Molly.
Joke's on me.
It's locked.
Ashlema to Lisa's parents.
Yeah, refuah shlema to Lisa's parents.
רפואה שלמה.
Which is great.
Thank you, Yuval.
Be well, everybody.
Kaufman.
Everyone.
Where's Yuval?
Thank you, Yuval. Oh, Yuval also spoke.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes.
Impressive family turnout from the Moeds. You really boosted
Oh, yeah,
us.
yeah, yeah. Yeti, Leon.
Scarf.
Hi, Leslie.
Yuval. Well, you have Leon and Marilyn here.
Nice.
See that?
Hi.
That's good. Great that you guys all joined. I think it's very meaningful. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Nito. It was almost as uplifting as your messages during the week.
You're welcome.
Yuval, you are absolutely incredible.
Okay, bye. It was nice talking. Bye.
We should meet at Simchas. Of Simchas.
Yes, amen, amen, amen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Health, bריאות to
Hey.
everyone.
Yes, Yuval.
Hi, Howie.
היי, משפחת קאופמן, מה שלומכם? טוב לראות אתכם.
להתראות.
איך אתם מרגישים?
להתראות אצל הספרית.
נכון, אל תגלי סודות, לא לגלות.
אנחנו מרגישים מצוין, תודה.
יופי, טוב, אתם נראים טוב, תשמרו על עצמכם.
Yuval, your stories reminded me of quite a few stories that I experienced not personally, but because I grew up in Switzerland. So in any case, I enjoyed hearing your stories.
I'm writing to Shuli Briggs.
That is maximum right now. Is that
Here's my name, Oshra.
Right, I'm writing to you. It's dangerous, you know?
Yeah, of course. You're not on mute.
Right. I'm writing to you.
Okay, well done, Savta.
Thank you very
Shuli,
much.
great idea, Shuli.
Savta, what are you going to do tomorrow now? You're not going to have all that stress of planning your tour. Not being tomorrow.
Miriam, it was such a moving talk that you gave, and I thought of you talking about 5 years underground, and we really need to learn to appreciate and put in proportions what we're going through now, you know?
I didn't even see the connection before I spoke it, but now that you've brought it up.
Really? Oh, are you
very
sure? Like when you said that, right away I said, what can we complain about?
No,
You know?
We really can't. It's very blessed.
And the picture in the background is unbelievable. The picture says it all, as Julie pointed out.
And if you look at Henry, he's very yellow. He was very yellow. It was only a few days before he passed.
But he looks very happy, shepping nachas from his family.
He did. He couldn't sleep for 2 days after that. He just was really.
This is the answer, building life.
Yes. Yes.
Growth.
Thank God. And that I have been truly blessed, and I constantly say thank you. That's all
Right.
I say.
We live in special times. Who would have believed to have a beautiful family like this in Israel now? Baruch Hashem.
Yes.
Baruch Hashem.
Yeah.
So everybody stay safe and really thank you. This was a great idea. Really.
And Nancy, show's over.
No, I've been here the whole time.
Wait,
I've been here.
I see you're promoting the masks and Big Deal. Is that a mask?
It's not from Big Deal. It's a homemade one. Someone gave it to me.
Oh, so maybe you can make some for Big Deal and sell them, you know?
I don't make them. Someone gave. I was at work and then I went shopping. That's why I was on like disappeared mode.
All right.
You
Okay.
need homemade masks? I've got someone who makes homemade masks.
Really?
Yeah. It's really nice one. Look.
Ooh, nice.
My
Who
bird
makes
mask.
them?
Oh,
Nice. Do they sell them? I'll buy some.
These ones are 3 for $100.
Ooh.
3-layer cotton masks. And they've got the little bit for the nose there with the wire, and you can wash them.
Oh, wow.
The wire's great.
This is my bird one. None of the boys will wear it, which is also great.
Cheese.
Comfortable.
Somebody in the North South.
I'll send you the number, Joshua.
Send me the number.
Okay.
Ariel got a double negative, double negative.
Oh, good.
But now Mayan has to get.
Oh, gosh. I didn't know what a double negative is, but
double negative, that means he doesn't have corona, that he's clean, Ariel Dietrich.
Fantastic.
And then Mayan needs to get. She has to get now one more bdika tomorrow morning, and we'll see. Bezrat Hashem. I want to get those kids out.
How are the kids feeling? Have you been able to go and see them?
No, I only see them from the port, downstairs. Because they have to be in bidud also with her.
But Ariel hasn't been staying with her, right?
No, he couldn't. Ariel's staying with his parents.
Why do they do that if they're both?
Because Ariel has a very low immune system. He doesn't have an immune system.
Oh.
So therefore, he's in danger. But he was the one who had it first. But he's okay now. He got through it, and now Mayan will get through it.
If once he has it, can it get worse from being with her if she's also got it? I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, they don't know how the corona works, and they don't know how his body works. So we'll see.
So it's better to keep him away.
Yes, but he at least got out today for the first time, and he spoke to them, from downstairs. And
so how come she ended up with the kids?
Because he was the first one that got it.
Okay. Right.
He was the one who got it, and then he had to leave the house and go to his parents.
Wow.
But I don't know, Julie, what's worse, being in solitude for like 3 weeks, not seeing a human being, a person, or being with 4 kids?
On your own and not seeing them. Tough question. Well, I could have split up half the kids, so everyone would have had a bit of both,
Yeah.
Maybe getting sent to one of the 5-star hotels might not be bad.
Yeah, and there was a joke, where was that, in Ramzor? Like, the guy wants to go to the hotel, he wants to leave his nagging wife, but when they offer him Beta Chayal in Tveria, he doesn't want to go.
He's waiting for the Carmel Resort.
Panorama, if it's the Don Panorama, or, depends which one you get.
Yeah, exactly. I'm waiting for the King David.
Right.
God forbid.
All right.
God forbid. I'm happy to
We
stay.
should all be well.
Amen.
Okay.
Yasher Koach Lachem to everybody back from New York.
Yes.
I'm leaving now.
Refuah shlema to anyone that needs it. Bye.
Bye. והאח של ויולה עדיין מאוד כואב.
Bye, everyone. I'm shutting down.
Can I have your maternal bit? No?